Live. 1 second. Okay. Some less of the show. Okay. You got it.
Ready? Okay. So we learned last week that the Rebbe is having trouble understanding the Medrash. The Medrash describes a king who came to a city, and he had his delegation with him, various different ministers, and the townspeople, each one of them decided who they're going to get close to, who they're going to become attached to and follow. And some people chose the ministers, and some people chose, and there was one person, the Medrash describes him as a wise person, he chose the king. And the Medrash gives a reason, because all of the ministers can be replaced. However, the king is not replaced. And the Rebbe is trying to understand, first of all, you don't have to be a very wise person to make a choice to go after the king. The king it's very obvious. Even a child understands that the king is greater. And second of all, what's this reason that they're all replaceable and the king is not replaceable? Yeah, this reason is like it's an outcome of the fact that the king is greater than them. It seems to be a strange reason. So the Medrash is trying to tell us something with it. What is it trying to tell us? Now, the nimshal of this mashal is the Yidden and the nations of the world. That the Yidden, the nations of the world, some of them serve the stars or the constellations, the mazalis. However, the Yidden only serve the Eibishter. So the Rebbe got into a discussion of what's this idea of serving Avodah Zarah, of serving the Kechavim and Mazalis. How did it come to be, right? Adam Rishon was the Chitzir Kapach Shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. The Eibishter formed him with his own hands, so to speak. And the Eibishter spoke to him, and certainly Adam Rishon told his children about the Eibishter. So what's this? How did we end up with a situation where, it's written that after a while, the name of Hashem was completely forgotten from the world? So it's described in Torah that this was a hishtalshlus, this was an evolution, a slow evolution over time. And last week we learned the first step in this evolution, or devolution, deterioration, whichever way you want to call it, progression from a proper way to less good, or to not good completely. So the first mistake was that the nations of the world looked at the way the Eibishter gives his hashpah to the world. Right? It's described in Torah and Chassidus that the hashpah that the Eibishter gives, it starts off all the way in Ein Sof, then it goes through a series of tzimtzumim until we leave the elements of Seviv and we end up in Mamar Beyom Ashtei, and then in Mamar Beyom Ashtei it goes from Atzilus and again a major tzimtzum, and then from Bria and so on. In each Madrega there's many tzimtzumim until finally it reaches Asiyah Haruchnis. And in Asiyah Haruchnis, then finally it ends up going down to Asiyah Gashmis, and it passes through the Sarim and the Kechavim and the Mazalis. That's what it's described as, the ministers and the stars and the constellations. So seeing that there's such a system where the energy, the life force that the Eibishter gives to the world comes through the stars and the constellations, so the nations of the world made a mistake. They said, they assumed that the stars and the constellations have the option of either giving over the energy of the Eibishter or not giving it over. They understood that the entire life force to create the world and to continue animating the world, to give it vitality, to keep it in existence, they understood that it all comes from the Eibishter. They didn't think that the Kechavim Mazalis have in them the power to do all of this. The only mistake that they made is that they thought that the Kechavim Mazalis can decide if they're going to transfer over this energy that Hashem is giving or to not transfer it over. Since they have a choice, so the appropriate thing would be to thank them for their services, for what they're doing. And additionally, they also figured that if we thank the Kechavim Mazalis, then the Kechavim Mazalis will give us additional energy. They'll give us more of the food, so to speak. They'll give us more of the energy that the Eibishter gives them. And this is where we're holding the Maimer. So it's the line that ends with the word umizeh. It's like right in the middle of Gimel on page Kuf. Umizeh. Umizeh nishtal shel achakach. And then from this, they evolved another mistake. Shabolatos b'dei yeser. They made an even greater mistake. Shechashvu, that they thought she'azav Hashem esa'aretz b'dei kechavim u'mazalis. The Eibishter abandoned the world and left it in the hands of the stars and the constellations. And the matters of the world, what happens down here in this world, is dependent only on the kechavim u'mazalis. That gives a mashal of it. B'dugmas melech. For example, like a king, you have a king, and he's ultimately in charge of the entire country. Shemina sarim lahanigas hamedina. However, he appointed ministers to run the country. The hagam shezeh shebekaychem lahanigas hamedina. Even though that the ministers have the power to run the country, is only by the power of the king, that the king appointed them to run the country. Nevertheless, after they were appointed, the running of the country is through the ministers, not through the king. And the king doesn't get involved in this for the most part, except for very infrequent occurrences. If there's a great need, if there's something that that is of great concern to the whole country, COVID-19, for example, or if the country is under threat, so then the king gets involved. Yeah, right. So then the king gets involved. In other words, they looked at it in a very human way of looking at things. They saw that you have a king. And the king, he is way beyond getting involved in the nitty-gritty. What subject are we going to teach in this class? What subject are we going to teach in this class? Or not even that. How many schools do we need to have in this city? And how many schools do we need to have in that city? The king appoints a minister, the minister of education. And then he appoints other people underneath him. And like this, that's how the thing is managed. And if you come to the king and you tell him, there's a school somewhere where in the class they're teaching the subject. Maybe they should teach a different subject. The king is going to look at you. It's funny. What are you coming to me for such a thing? I'm not involved in these things. Go to the minister or go to the minister's office, and over there they'll take care of the matter. So too the nations of the world figured that the Eibishter, it's the pasuk Rama Kol Goyim Hashem is brought in other Mamarim, that the Eibishter, he's above and beyond having anything to do with this world. This world is too minor, is too insignificant. What happens, what a human being does when I wake up in the morning, if I behave ethically or if I don't behave ethically, if I do this mitzvah or that mitzvah, it's nonsense. It doesn't make any sense. The one who created the world and the one who keeps creating this massive universe with all of the stars and the different galaxies and whatever, that he should be involved and care what happens. I mean, even a human being doesn't care if he has a garden. He doesn't count how many ants are in the garden. And if the ants do this or that, it's of no significance to him whatsoever. So they figured it's the same thing with the Eibishter. That the Eibishter left the world in the hands of his ministers, which would be the stars and the constellations, and he doesn't get involved whatsoever. So from the first mistake, where they thought that the Eibishter does get involved, he does decide and pay attention to what happens in this world, and based on what happens in this world, he decides who should get energy and how much energy he should get. It's only that he passes it through these ministers, and they have the choice of either continuing it on to us or not. They came to an even greater mistake, that the Eibishter Bechlal doesn't pay attention to what's going on in this world. He doesn't care whatsoever. And what happens on this world is totally in the hands of the Kechavim and Mazalis. Shlomo says the Rebbe, this that it says in Gemara. It's an interesting Gemara. I just looked at it when I was preparing for the shir. The Rav says that if it's geographically in a certain place in the world, in a small geographic region, so the nations of the world know about the greatness of the Eibishter, and they know about the greatness of his nation, the Yidden. It's interesting that the Gemara puts these two together: the greatness of the Eibishter and the greatness of his nation, the Yidden. So Rav Shimi asks, but it says doch in a pasuk in Malachi, Ki mimizach shemesh v'ad mevoi gadol shmi bagoyim, from where the sun rises in the east till where it sets in the west. In other words, the entire earth. Right. Wherever the sun shines, my name is great amongst the nations. They all know about me. So Rav answers in a very interesting way. He says, Shimiat, are you Shimi? Rashi explains, are you Shimi? Are you the Talmud Chacham Shimon? You're asking me such a question. Don't you know the obvious answer? The answer is that they call the Eibishter Elikada Elikaya. They taka know the name of the Eibishter. Only they say that he is the Elikada Elikaya. how do you touch lekada lekaya? So it's one of the names of the Eibishter you're not supposed to say in any language. So in Lashon Kodesh we make it a leka. I'm not sure exactly how to touch it over here. In Russian they say ba. The old Hasidim used to say ba. The full word for the Eibishter in Russian is ba, and then it's followed by ga. So we'll just say ba, slava ba. It's not or some other abbreviation of the word, not to say the whole thing. Elikim, the name of Elikim, each name of the Eibishter, Taka refers to the Eibishter, but it expresses a different aspect of the Eibishter. And the Shem Elikim, like we know from Rashi in Chumash, is a lashon of Dayan or a Moishel, somebody who rules. So we'll touch over here, Elikada Elikaya, the ruler of the worlds, of the rulers. That you have the rulers, you have the Kachavim Mazalis, you have the Getchkes, the Avodah Zarah. The Eibishter is Elikada Elikaya. He rules over them. So that was Rav's answer to Rav Shimi, that they know the name of the Eibishter, but what do they consider him to be? They consider him to be not Elikah of the world. He's Elikah de Elikaya. He's the ruler over the other rulers. And this is Avodah Zarah. And this is Avodah Zarah. To ascribe any power to any being except for the Eibishter is Avodah Zarah. The mitzvah of believing in the Eibishter includes in it not only that the Eibishter created the world, but that everything that happens in the world is completely in the Eibishter's control. There is no other force in the world that can determine what's going to happen here in any way, shape, or form. So calling the Eibishter Elikada Elikaya, that there are other rulers, Narvas, the Eibishter is a ruler over them, is already Avodah Zarah. And the Rebbe over here says that these two categories of people who served Avodah Zarah in these two ways, they're actually both included in this part of Elikada Elikaya, that their mistake is that they're calling the Eibishter the Eibishter of Kivyachol the Getchkes, the ruler over the rulers. Even those who made the greater mistake, that they thought that the Eibishter completely abandoned the world in the hands of the stars and the constellations. They still call the Eibishter that he is the Eibishter. He's the Eibishter. The problem is that it's the Elikaya, that there are other Eibishters involved, but they do call the Eibishter the Eibishter. Why do they call him Elikah? Because first of all, you have the simple fact that they acknowledge that the Eibishter is greater than the Kechavim Umazalis. He's greater than the Getchkes, and he controls them, he governs them, he has the say over what they're going to do. Even they ascribe to the Eibishter even more. Even this, the fact itself, the fact alone, that these Kechavim Umazalis are an Elikaya, they're a ruler, they have a power over the events in the world, in their mistaken opinion. Meaning to say that they have a power to lead the world and to give it hashpah, to give it energy. They acknowledge that it's not from their own power. They couldn't originate it. They don't have anything in them to create such a thing. That only the Eibishter has. It's only because the Eibishter gave them the power to do it. Similar to the ministers of a king, that they run the country only because the king appointed them to run the country. And that's why they call the Eibishter Lekada Lekaya. On the other hand, also the smaller mistake, the earlier mistake that was made by the earlier generations, that the hashpah that the Eibishter gives to this world, taka comes from the Eibishter, and he taka decides what he wants to do and what should happen on this world. But it's just that it comes through the choice of the Kechavim Mazalis, that they have to agree. If not, they could stop it from coming. So nichlal bedakos be'elikada elikaya. This is also included in the problem of calling them elikada elikaya, or of considering the Eibishter to be elikada elikaya, because these Kechavim Mazalis, they are also an elikaya, they're also a ruler, they have a power over the world. The fact alone that they could do as they please, in the sense, in other words, they can't actually give something that the Eibishter doesn't want to give, but they could do as they please in the sense of lahashpia elav, to give over this hashpah from the Eibishter or to not give it over. Hu inyan shel shlita, they're ascribing to the Kechavim Mazalis an inyan of ruling on the world, elikaya. Ushlilas inyan delikim acherim. This that it says in Ashtei Asar Yom, the true belief in the Eibishter is to know that there is no elikim acherim. And like we mentioned earlier, elikim is milashon of anybody who can has any rulership over the world, betachlis completely, it's only by knowing that all of the intermediaries are nothing more than an axe in the hands of a stonecutter. In other words, that just like the stonecutter holds the axe and controls it in every which way, the axe has no say whatsoever how the building is going to look, or if the building should be built in the first place, what kind of decorations it should have. It's merely a tool that's under the complete control of the stonecutter. That looking at the Kechavim Mazalos in the same way is the only way to have a complete belief in the Eibishter. Anything less than that is creating an Avodah Zarah. So it sounds a little abstract. So let's maybe use a little thought exercise to try to understand what's the difference between these two groups who serve the Getchkes. What's the difference between them? So if you had a nation who served the Getchkes in the first way, the Kechavim Mazalos, where they believed that the Eibishter is the one who decides everything that happened on this world. It's just that the Kechavim Mazalos, they're an intermediary, it comes through them, and they have to agree to continue giving the hashpah. So if there was a situation where the people down here in this world needed help with something, right? Let's say there was a war between two nations, and one nation wants to go now and appeal to a higher power, to ask them that they should succeed in the war.
It should send them the mix.
Should send them their mix. So what if you made the first mistake? If this nation, if they made the first mistake, what would they do? Right? First of all, they would have been korbanos to the Eibishter, because the Eibishter is the one who pays attention to what happens in this world and decides who should win, who should not win. Second of all, they would make sure that they're behaving in ways that they understand the Eibishter wants them to behave. Because if not, the Eibishter isn't going to give them anything. The Kechavim Mazalos have nothing to give them. It all comes from the Eibishter. So that's the first thing they would do. Then after that, they would also bring karbanos to the Getchkes. Because now that we convinced the Eibishter, we satisfied him, we gave him the things that he likes in our behavior and in karbanos, we bribed him, he's on our side. The Eibishter is on our side. We have to make sure that these Kechavim Mazalos don't ruin everything, in the last second. The hashpah is going to come from the Eibishter himself. It's going to come all the way down to this world, and then it's going to get stuck by the Kechavim Mazalos. We have to bring them also lahavdil karbanos, so that they should give us what we want. That was the first mistake. The second mistake took it much further. In the second mistake, where they figured that the Eibishter doesn't care what happens in this world, he's not aware. It's small things. It doesn't matter to him whatsoever. Even though they acknowledge that the power for anything that comes in this world ultimately originates in the Eibishter, however, they believe that the Eibishter handed over that power. He gave it over to the Kechavim Mazalos, and now he's not looking. He doesn't care. When he's interested in something, he gets involved with the Kechavim Mazalos. That's what he gets busy with. What goes on down here in this world, he doesn't get busy with whatsoever. So they wouldn't bother to behave ethically and morally in a way that the Eibishter would condone, would look on in a good way, because the Eibishter doesn't care. So why shouldn't I steal? What bearing does it have if I steal, or if I have other not good midas on whether or not I'll win the war? If I steal, I have a better chance of winning the war, because now I have more things to fight the war with. So the only thing that they're going to do is they're going to appeal to the Kechavim Mazalos. The Eibishter they completely forgot about. And these two different concepts is what's called shituf or avodah zarah completely. Shituf, avodah zarah completely is the simpler one to understand, where you believe that the Eibishter is completely uninvolved in the world. In other words, even somebody who believes that the Eibishter exists and that many years ago the Eibishter is the one who created the world, but he believes that what happens in this world is under the control and is by the decision of other entities, not the Eibishter, that's avodah zarah. Shituf is where you believe in the Eibishter, not only that he created the world so many years ago, but that he's still here, he's still involved in what goes on in the world. However, there's somebody else who also has a say. So, without getting into the categories of if a guy is allowed to have shituf, if a guy is not allowed to have shituf, in general, the Rebbe says that b'dakos al kolpanim, whichever way you look at it, this is a vart of avodah zarah. Maybe it's a good time to stop for a second and
talk about
and think a little bit about how is this applicable to us in our life, right? We didn't get yet to the point of the Mamar whatsoever, and so this is not the point of the Mamar, but I can't help myself but think the application that these ideas have in our life is something that we should think about, because yeah, we all remember the days when we were just out of yeshiva, before we actually started working for a living, and we were coming off of what we were used to, that whatever you need, you go to mommy and tati. You want to buy pizza, you go to mommy. They give you $10 or whatever it costs, however old you were when you were going to the pizza store as a kid. They give you the money, you go buy pizza. Money wasn't a concern whatsoever. The challenges of this world, for the most part, unless you had families that struggled, but for the most part, by children, money wasn't an issue at all. So then you go to yeshiva and you hear from your yeshiva, you hear the story that the world has no say whatsoever in what happens. Everything will be good. Have faith in the Eibishter. Don't worry. Do Torah mitzvahs. Believe in the Eibishter, and you'll get the money the way you're supposed to. It's very easy to accept that concept, because that's what you were used to your whole life, that you don't have to worry about money. Then we get a little older, and it's time for us to support ourselves. And now we start doing business, and suddenly we're hit by all of the challenges that all of us know of supporting a family, even supporting ourselves. And it can begin to seem to us that, maybe if I stay a little extra at work, or maybe if I skip davening with the minyan in the morning, and I'll put in a few more hours, chas v'sholom, at work, so I'll have more money. After all, I don't see how I'm going to, make it to the end of the month. I see that my neighbor, the Rebbe, wants to put it in terms of a storekeeper, not of somebody putting in more hours, but of a storekeeper who keeps the store open. And he sees all the other stores on the street. They're open for longer. They're all selling goods. Every hour that he has his store open, so more income comes in. So we know these challenges. It's very hard to deny the reality that is right in front of our face, and to say, I'm going to daven with the minyan, even if it means that my store is going to open up later. And when it comes 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, whatever time it is, that's the end of the day for you. I'm walking away. I'm closing the business. I'm not thinking about it. Now I have other obligations. It's very, very hard to pull this off. It's very, very hard to do this. So it's easy for us to look at these people who lived so many years ago. They served the Geshkes, and they thought that there are other powers in the world, whether that the other powers have complete control over what happens in the world, or at least that they have some say in the world. If we try to translate that into our own language, into our own day-to-day life, we see that this is an aveda that we have to work on. It's an aveda that we're all challenged with. I don't know the person alive, including myself, that doesn't stumble to some degree, right? Some of us, Rahman al-Islam, could fall terribly in this. But some of us, so let's say on a regular Wednesday, they won't stay extra at work. But if there's a deadline, and the buyer, the customer is waiting for the proposal, and if you don't send it, it's going to be oy. So it gets to you. So it's not so easy to deny this existence of kechavim umazolis in our personal life, that there are other things that have a say of, will I make the mortgage at the end of the month? Will I have food in the fridge? To deny that there's not, I know that I have to daven with the minyan, I'm going to daven with the minyan, I'll come later, so be it. Every once in a while, we get a glimpse of this truth. I was talking once to a friend of mine. He's a successful businessman, and he told me, I'm telling you, you should know that every deal that I worked on, that I stayed on until 3 o'clock at night, if I made money, it was small. All of my big business, the big money that came in, all came in from things that I did, in a regular time, and didn't overdo the amount of work that I'm supposed to put into it. So we know it. We know it in our head. But but to actually follow that behavior can be a challenge. Yeah, it can be a challenge to do that.
One customer could make up for the 10 customers. I find, and this is from my own personal experience, I could have so many variables that have to fit into place, and I know that it's not shaykh b'teva for everything to place. That's prayer. You sit and you don't rush davening, and you finish them and you do everything, and then you find that this guy came and showed up, and this guy let him in, and that guy. Things start happening. And I'm just saying this, I'm not, because you're right. You think that everything is, if you don't make these phone calls and you don't reach these people and you don't make these things happen, then it's not going to happen. but it will happen. It's insane, but it will happen.
It will have a hard, and this is taka what it says that the
Yeah.
Baal Esek, the person who lives in the business world, sees Ashkacha Pratis much more than the Mashpia and thereof, because as we get older, we see it more and more. From my own experience, I could say that most of the things that I pressured myself to finish on a deadline ended up being completely irrelevant. Either the meeting was postponed and I was preparing myself for a meeting, the guy calls up, says, I have a fever. So, it's just, or something else supersedes it. So one way or another, it you see it. And yet for me to say that it comes 6:00, I lock the computer, get out of the office, and I don't think about it until the next morning. And it's like you were saying, it's good advice. If I don't think about work until I get back to the next day to work, to my desk, then when I'm at work, my head is fresh. I didn't chew over the thing 20 times and forgot already the point, where it was coming from, where it was going. So I come to it. If I'm thinking about it between 6 and 11 or 12 at night, I can't do anything about it anyways. I'm just stressing over it and going through all the possibilities and whatever. By the time it comes to do something, my mind is so fatigued from the subject, I can't think clearly anymore. So it's Pasha Begashmias. If you go to a career coach, he'll tell you probably to do the same thing. And yet it's hard. It's hard to pull off. So this is, this is the question is, what's the eitz over here? The Rebbe is going to give us an eitz later in the Maimer of how to help us, that we should stay to it 100%. Not only some of the time, not only most of the time, but 100%. And you could measure it in time-wise, how many times you did something, how many times you didn't. You could also measure it qualitatively. How much am I taka there? Did I leave the office, but really I wished I could have stayed, or did I walk out of the office smiling, sure that I did my thing, and now for sure the money is going to come, like it says in Ayem Yom. So we'll get a little help from the Rebbe in this Maimer later on. Al Kolpanim says, let's get back over here to the Teichen of the Maimer. Val Pizeh, according to this understanding, in other words, according to this understanding that the Rebbe said that the hashpah that comes down to the world doesn't come directly from the Eibishter. The Eibishter puts it through these tools of the Kechavim U'Mazalis. He puts it through the stars and the constellations. And therefore, superficially, you can make a mistake and think that the energy is actually coming from the stars and the constellations. So, we could possibly explain the cleverness of the one who says, who says, I'm not getting distracted by any of the ministers. I am following the king. We can understand it in the Nimshol when we're talking about serving Avodah Zarah versus serving the Eibishter. How can we understand it? This that the Yidden know the truth. That all the intermediaries, all of the intermediaries through whom the Eibishter sends the hashpah down to this world are only and nothing more than an axe in the hands of a stonecutter. In other words, they have no control over what's going to happen whatsoever. That the Yidden can perceive this, can recognize this, and acknowledge it comes from their great wisdom, from their great understanding. Because they see the inner truth of things. Because superficially it seems like. These words over here, it says there's so much hiding in these words. Superficially it seems It's superficially it seems that the hashpah comes through the kechavim mazalos is because there is something special and important about them, and that's why the hashpah comes through them. So, looking at things superficially, let's talk about that a little bit. I heard a joke once about the way science looks at the world, and the way science tries to determine, where the energy for the world comes from, and what the truth of things is. The way they, take things apart, observe it, and observe the behavior, and make experiments. And with this, they try to conclude what the truth of the universe is and what the truth of everything is. So it would be like somebody taking a book. The case was that somebody wrote about his life, how he overcame his challenges and his struggles and ultimately succeeded. Or a book about somebody describing his personal life, something even more with more emotional power in it. And the scientists, if they would follow the same method, so they would take the book, they would put it under a microscope, And they would analyze it. They would find that it's made out of paper, and the paper is made out of fibers, and these fibers are actually, they come from wood, and the tree actually, the wood actually grew from a tree, and the ink, the pigments came from different places. And one day they would come and they'd make a big announcement that all of you for the past few hundreds of years were reading this book and thought that this book is a story of triumph over challenges and overcoming and succeeding in life. You're all mistaken. We looked at it, we analyzed it. We could tell you 100% that it's paper and ink. And not only that, we're so smart that we could actually, did you know this? The paper that you think is paper is actually made out of fibers. And the fibers actually come from a tree. It's such an impressive body of knowledge that we have over here. And so stop being old-fashioned with your old beliefs that this is a book about life and about growth, personal growth, or connection, or devotion, dedication. All of these weird ideas that can't be seen with a scientific method. It's not scientifically observable. It's ridiculous. But that's what they do. That's what they do all the time. And it's very sad when they apply it also to people. A person born without being influenced and affected by the philosophies of the day feels and knows that he has a soul. He understands that he's something. He understands that I'm not a combination of parts, like a car is a combination of a bunch of parts that were taken off the shelf. He understands that there's a me over here. There's something deeper over here. And come the scientists, or like the Umm the same way that they looked at things bechitzenis, they look at things superficially, and they insist that the human being is another species of mammals. You have many animals, and the human being is just another animal. There is no soul. This is old-fashioned things, and then you wonder why people are falling apart. They're being told that the most basic, most important thing that a person needs is to that his reality should be confirmed, that he has a soul, that he is a person. He's not just a piece of meat roaming the earth with some energy in it, but he's a person. That's what he feels on his inside. And the whole world and the whole educational system from kindergarten all the way to the doctorate level is insisting, no, you should know that the human being is another species of mammals. What's their mistake? What's their mistake over here that causes such a destruction, the unhealth, the amount of anxiety, the amount of broken families? I mean, we all know what's going on in the world. What's the mistake over here is bechitzenius nira. They look at things superficially. Instead of paying attention to the inside, to the inner truth of the book, that it's the contents of the book, it's not the paper and the ink, or to the person, that it's his soul, it's not his body, they just look at things superficially. And this was the same mistake. These people, they're continuing this long tradition of idol worship. It's the same exact mistake, looking at things superficially. Like we mentioned in the first year, the sun, the heat, and the other forms of energy that come from the sun is what causes all the plants to grow through photosynthesis and everything else. The oil that's extracted from the earth, it seems like it came from organic matter, and the organic matter grew from the sun. The movement of the winds and the clouds, the fact that you have water evaporating, and then the changes in the weather, it's all powered, it's all energized by the sun. So looking bechitzenius, what's that?
It's the sun.
It's the sun. Looking bechitzenius, it's the sun. And this that you say that there's one nation who understood throughout history that it's not the sun, they peeled a layer back, and they understood that it's actually the Eibishter. The Eibishter is the one acting through all of this. So this is Taka, great wisdom. It's not only that we're smarter, it's not only saying that those who can see that are smarter than the primitive people who lived 5,000 years ago and believed in idols. It's the same, they're making the same mistakes now. They're looking at things superficially.
It's a certain Avodah Zarah that people push it went to the bathroom in front of Avodah Zarah. That's how they served it. But initially what happened was that when they first came across this Avodah Zarah, they wanted to serve it, they were so nervous and they couldn't contain it, so they went to the bathroom. So now they go to the bathroom.
True. Yeah. So they're going back and back. You're
exactly.
saying to a more primitive time.
The result was
so that's the way it became. This the way of serving it. So they're becoming more primitive and more primitive.
Yeah.
Taka true. And then you wonder, why people are why the craziness that's going around in society. Al Kolpanim. So this that the Eden were able to see that everything that comes down to the world through the Kechavim Mazalos. That they were able to look through the superficiality, where it seems that everything comes through the Kechavim Mazalos. It's because they have something special to them. And it's not this important power or whatever it is that they have. Therefore, it was befitting. The Eibishter chose them to be intermediaries. In other words, it wasn't because the Eibishter was in control of the process. It was because he saw these things, these Kechavim Mazalos, and he said, they have something special in them, so I'm going to use them to be my intermediaries. And this that the Yidden don't make this mistake. And they know that all of these Kechavim Mazalos and any other intermediary, whether it be business or customers or partners or whatever it is nothing more than an axe in the hand of the stone cutter. It's taka because of the great amount of wisdom that they have. Okay. I think we should leave it here because it's only 3 minutes. Okay. All right.
Beautiful. Looking forward. I gotta run to the thing.
Mazel tov.
The whole family is there. I just got the pictures.
No, it's okay. Go.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I'm going with my daughter.
Uncle Tzvi's coming.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's with
Shalom Aleichem.